Hello and welcome to another episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. I'm your host here, Zach Chavalello, with Justin Crosby, as always, and a special guest, Liam Sagherian. Liam is the newest writer on the Philadelphia 76ers team at PSN. So we are super happy to have both these guys here, but especially Liam. Liam, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody watching along today?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Happy to be with PSN. So I can't thank everyone enough for having me on the team and introducing me here on the podcast. I live in Westchester. I'm a 5 for 5 Philadelphia sports fan, and I love basketball. I could watch basketball all day, every day, try and see new things and try and break down the different parts of the game that I'm always trying to learn more about the intricacies of the sport. So I really try and kind of pride myself on having a very deep knowledge base when it comes to the sport and when it comes to the NBA. And I really, I love the Sixers, but I try to stay as impartial and as unbiased as I can. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Happy to be on the podcast with you guys, and I'm excited for what's to come with PSN.
Yeah, and we're excited to have you on, man. You may have already seen a couple of Liam's articles out there already on PSN. A recap of Tyrese Maxey's guest spot on Paul George's podcast. In addition to that, taking a look at some forwards that the Sixers could potentially sign to minimum deals. And there's also a great profile on Caleb Martin and some takeaways from the Summer League. So be sure to check out his work on Philly Sports Network. But with that introduction now accomplished, let's talk about some Olympic basketball. We haven't really talked about it on the pod this summer. It was, I must say, one of the most as interesting as anyone expected Joel Embiid being in the Olympics to be. I think this kind of exceeded all those expectations. Now we didn't get the performance that we expected out of Embiid per se, but when you look at all the stories, the narratives around it, just start to finish, everything that we saw, I think this was one of the most unique Olympic journeys that we've seen for a player on Team USA for quite a bit. But before we get to, the big day itself, I'd like to take a quick look just at the totality of Joel Embiid's Olympic tenure, with Team USA today. And Justin, I'd like to start with you. What were really your impressions of what you saw Embiid throughout this entire Olympic process?
Yeah, that's a two-prong answer for me. First, we could talk about his play later, but just the discourse around him as a person, player, individual, it got at an all-time high of ridiculousness, and it was borderline insufferable. It was ridiculous about him as a player, about where he fits on the hierarchy of other players around the league. It just got to the point where it was just too much. And we all know Embiid relishes in those type of conversations of fans talking about him and fans hating him. He already thinks he's one of the most disliked players in the league, which is probably really true. But that portion of it got, in my opinion, got really disgusting, especially in the warm-up games and in the beginning of pool play. But once he started to perform a little bit better, like other players don't have bad games or have trouble fitting into Team USA as a whole because it's a different role for a lot of these guys. So, once he started to have some better, performances, it was good. And then obviously, his performance against Serbia and performance against Brazil, both back to back, were really good performances that, specifically against Serbia in the semifinal match, they really needed him. And he lived up to the billing of what type of player he is. So overall, I think, he had his ups and downs, but it was a really good experience for him and a really good experience for this upcoming season. what he's going to have to deal with really empowering Tyrese Maxey and Paul George, having him around. So being able to defer to other stars and finding something different to do on every night. I mean, we obviously know he's going to be scoring a ball, but it might not be nights where he has to force it, and he's learned to defer to others, I think. And I think this is a really good experience for him mentally. So obviously happy that they won. Obviously happy that, they won the gold and he got a gold medal. But I think the experience was good. And the only thing I just really disliked was the discourse around him, as like it kind of got personal online. So that was like one thing that was disappointing to me.
Yeah, it definitely went too far there. Before kind of going more into the discourse around Joel Embiid, because I think it's a broader topic than just the Olympics. It kind of ties into everything. But you talked about how these Olympic Games can kind of be uncomfortable for players, and you kind of put them out of role, out of position, and sometimes they even find themselves on the bench. We have Martian Lynch checking in. What's up, Martian Lynch? Good to see you, brother. Does Halliburton bring home gold too? Or is that the kind with chocolate in the middle? Now, here's the one thing that we don't know about Tyrese Halliburton's medal. We did not see that photo like we saw with Joel Embiid testing it out. So we cannot say for sure whether or not Halliburton's is chocolate or if that is pure gold. But I guess we'll find out one of these days, maybe the next time he's on Podcast P. And for Halliburton, it's one thing when you look at, because a lot of these guys sat for different games, right? Steve Kerr just kind of did. As I guess he should have his own thing because he was selected to be the head coach. I probably would have had some different rotations, but I'm not selected to be the head coach of Team USA. That being said, guys sat games. Joel Embiid sat a game. Tyrese Halliburton sat a lot longer, and Jason Tatum, sat a couple games as well. But with that being said, I think it's an opportunity for all those guys, right? So Embiid being the most veteran of all those, and he also sat the least of all those as well. I think it was a useful opportunity for him to be able to just observe how the team functions, right? Because we look at guys who are on the roster, guys like Anthony Davis, guys like Bam Adebayo, and contrary to what Twitter may have you believe, Joel Embiid is better than those players. However, both of those players have great ways of impacting the game in ancillary ways, right? In terms of their defensive presence, in terms of rebounding. Now, Joel Embiid is an all NBA defender. Like this is not a knock on Joel Embiid's defense. But what we would like to see, and I think based on his comments, at least what Joel would like to see of himself, going forward this season, now that Paul George is here, another year under Tyrese Maxey, is for him to be able to take that bit of a step back offensively so that he can perform better as a defender, as a rebounder in those situations, and be a little bit more Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo-esque while still maintaining his prowess as an overall better player. But it was an interesting overall Olympic experience. Getting back to the discourse, though, that we saw with Embiid, so much of it, Justin, you mentioned that he's kind of the most hated player in the NBA, and I think he's mentioned something such as that as well. I believe it was on a podcast with Drew Hanlon. I mean, you go on Twitter and who's hated more than Joel Embiid, and it's not just Denver Nuggets fan base, it's not just Nikola Jokic stands, it's not just Laker bros. It's generally around, and it definitely went too far, especially when you had guys demanding for his passport in Paris as if he owes something to France, which is ridiculous. But the discourse got a little, I don't want to say unreal, because for those who have followed closely, this is entirely within the realm of possibility. But the way that he reacted to it was consistent. And we even saw that kind of bleed into the rest of Team USA, right? By the end, when they're being honored at the gold medal ceremony, France raining boos down upon Joel Embiid and all of Team USA for just defeating France. But let's be honest, a lot of it was also because they saw the guy who spurned them getting gold while their team finished with silver. And so I guess, what I should say is, Liam, what did you really see in that experience for Joel Embiid? We've seen him laugh off being the hated player and being the troll before. This is the first time we've seen it on an international stage, on as bright a stage as this. The Sixers having not even been to the NBA finals, have never dealt with, this level of coverage as a team. So now Joel Embiid as an individual, you could say the very same thing of until he comes into these Olympic Games. So the fact that he maintained that same personality that we've always seen, that people have both loved and hated from Joel Embiid, what was your takeaway to see him kind of be consistent in that aspect and also influence his superstar teammates at the same time?
Yeah, I think it kind of shows where he's gotten to on a mental and personal level, given where he was in the past. When you think about in playoffs past, back to 2021 and 2019, when the going gets tough, he kind of, willowed and he would fly the plane and DX chop when things were going well, but that same sort of energy wasn't there to be found when things weren't going well, and he was kind of just cowering. And I think now, obviously things went well for Team USA. They won the gold medal, but it wasn't um, without its struggles, namely against Serbia. But France made it close at the end too, and to see him power through those tough times in a way that he kind of hasn't responded to those before, I think was important. Him obviously not getting hurt over the course of the Olympics is a big win, and him being able to experience, the biggest win of his basketball career with a bunch of the league's best players can only do good for him as he figured out, over the span of the exhibition games and the actual Olympic games, how to kind of fit into a role when you're playing alongside other greats. He's only ever been the system in Philadelphia, and you kind of saw that player, especially as the Olympics started, him trying to make or him trying to do his normal ISO spots and stuff like that. But as the games went on, he really, I think, tried to fit into a more complementary role, and then obviously took over where he needed to in the second half against Serbia. And then he obviously had a very good fourth quarter against France as well. Um, so I kind of think that over the course of this summer, it's his maturity, his emotional maturity has been on display more than anything. And while he still might be a troll and he still might be one of the more hated players in the league, he's not willing to run from that like I think at one point he was.
Yeah, it's funny. You say his emotional maturity. I don't think that's a word a lot of people would use for Joel Embiid, considering the DX chop and this and that. But I think you're right that is what it is at the same time, because there's so many ways that athletes can respond to criticism. And I mean, listen, there's a national story coming out of Boston right now about how one guy responded to criticism. Like, there are so many different ways that an athlete can respond to levels of hate. And Embiid, you know, listen, it wasn't just a guy telling him, that he needs a tennis racket to hit a baseball. Like, there's true hatred coming Joel Embiid's way from, some of these people from all over, whether they're from France, whether they're, from the wherever they're from, basically. So uh, I think the fact that he answers in these admittedly, sometimes childish ways is in a way a showing of maturity as well, just simply due to the fact that he's writing them off effectively and showing that those criticisms are no big deal to him, as opposed to, responding with equal venom, equal hatred. And, it's not, I don't know that you'll ever look at that as, let's say, an organization, let's say that, whatever the case may be, and say, that's the ideal response. But what I will certainly say is I think it's a good, fact in his corner that you have a guy who's able to laugh off criticism like that. You want to see him perhaps respond in ways that almost acknowledges it by proving those people wrong at times. I think that's the one thing with Embiid that we haven't really seen. You talk about the postseason failures that he's seen, and those obviously aren't all on Embiid. And now, with Paul George and just a better suited roster alongside him, maybe we see those questions finally answered. But the fact that he's effectively turning those criticisms into a joke, I think that if you're, trying to say, hey, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? It's definitely a good thing. And as funny as it may sound, it's a sign of maturity. Mrs. Sandman checks in saying, why does Embiid have to carry Team USA when he's not really American in the first place? Let the Hall of Famers carry the team. Right. So what is an American, right? I just want to talk about this real quick, and then I want to stop talking about this because listen, we know what it is, right? He's an American citizen. He is really an American, right? So just because he was not born in America does not mean that he's not American. And America, of all places, right? Granted, this is the process for all countries that if you have citizenship, you are considered among their people. But America, of all places, that is especially the place, just considering the country's history. Like, was George Washington not American? Like, at a certain point, yes, but by his, his tenure, undoubtedly, he was American, right? So you have a guy who spent just about half his life in America. He's a citizen here. He got married here. His child was born here. He's done most of his I would say the key moments of his life, right? That being the tail end of his education, that being his entire NBA career. He has spent in America the majority of that time as a citizen. He's an American. So, like, that argument, it never really carried a lot of water for me. You talk about the American dream and this and that, and we so often lose the fact that, the American dream for the core of its time that it was talked about was of immigrants coming over to live said American dream or pursuing that American dream, right? So, the fact that he was not born in America does not make him any less American after becoming a citizen of the country. So, I have no problem with Embiid being on the roster. I actually love to see it because I think that is almost more, maybe not more American, but it almost encapsulates the idea of being American. So, I love to see it. Embiid loved to be here. And it looked like Arthur had a great time in Paris by some of Joel's Instagram pictures. So, I have no problem with that. And I encourage more guys like that moving forward. Yeah. So I'm going to get off this topic because, we're not here to get into ridiculous arguments, but, Joel Embiid, certified American, certified gold medal winner. Let's get on to the competition itself. I say that's what we do there. So, Justin, we're going to talk about the Serbia game and then the France game specifically.
Yeah.
Watching that Serbia game, what was your gut feeling? Let's talk those first three quarters. How are you feeling, not just about Embiid, but throughout the entire process of those first three quarters? What was your comfortability level?
I mean, I just had a feeling all along that it was going to be a tough game because it's hard to beat a team 3 times in 2 weeks, right? So I'm like, already there probably going to be some familiarity of what they do, some changes on like defensively for Serbia and how they would play defense against the United States. But also, like, Serbia just went crazy from 3 in the first 3 quarters. And it was just like, you would hope that they wouldn't replicate that in the fourth quarter, and they didn't. They didn't hit any threes in the fourth quarter. So I think that sort of helped, and they were hitting like crazy, just like unreal shots. And through 3 quarters, when they got it, I think might have been like 6 late in the third, but then they went back to like 11 going into the fourth or whatever it was. I just thought in my head, if they can get it down to at least 6 points with like 4 minutes to go, they will have a chance. And they did that. And Embiid, unreal stretch of 7 straight plus some defense. Then he was playing some more defense earlier on in the third quarter. I know earlier they were like kind of attacking him and stuff a little bit on the pick and roll, but he just came out and decided that, and we know he gets up for the Jokic games, whatever, but he just kind of decided that this was a game that, of course, we talk about Brazil, but this is the game, especially in the second half, that he would, exert his will. And seeing the team kind of defer to him in that moment for like 3 minutes straight or whatever on the offensive end, just letting him get to his spots, coming down and getting to his mid range a couple times, then letting him take advantage of some switching ability, and then also him cutting it to 2 points with his bucket against Jokic. Like I think that like powered him up, and it also powered the team up. Like okay, he's bringing us as close as he can. Let's help the big guy finish it off. And I think ultimately, I think his spark, of course, Steph was amazing, right? And so was LeBron. But I feel like, that spark, that energy he gave, that burst was what they really needed. And honestly, the play where he dunked and like, I feel like that was a cap of, a start of something. Whereas like he hadn't really been dunking the entire tournament. And then all of a sudden he goes baseline on Jokic and throws it down. And clearly he falls because his doctors tell him to fall. But that was like a spark plug. Like, all right, if he's doing that, like we got to give our all. And, I think that's kind of, where he came in the Serbia game. But trust me, it was very, very heart racing. Like, as a fan for USA basketball, I was like emotionally draining watching that game. Like I remember telling my wife, like after that game, I was like, I don't care what the Phillies or any other sports team do. I'm emotionally drained from that game, and I'm not giving my energy in any other sport. You know what I mean? Like that's really how it was. But yeah, he definitely helped that helps spur that comeback and give them the energy they needed.
Yeah, the airs were kind of out of the tires on I'd say the majority of that game. It was just a slog to watch for a minute, but yeah, I think you're right. Embiid was kind of that catalyst and transformed that fourth quarter, and it was LeBron and Steph who put him away. But the guy who started that rally, which seemed like a miracle at the time. I mean, just the way, not only the deficit that Team USA was facing, but just the way that the game was going. It just seemed like Team USA couldn't establish themselves against Serbia, and I mean, you had Bogdan Bogdanovic, talking shit over to Carmelo Anthony, and just Serbia was feeling real big, and at the time, deservedly so. They played a hell of a game. They ended up winning the bronze medal game as well. But listen, when it mattered, Joel Embiid stepped up. That's something he's been often criticized for, and he carried that team even just for a moment. People talk about, well, he never really established himself in these Olympics, and it wasn't his role to play superstar on this team. That was Steph Curry, that was LeBron James. But you look at some of these other guys like Devin Booker, who did a good job, especially towards the end, in really finding his lesser role on this team. And that's what Joel Embiid did in that moment. He stepped up when the team needed him to, and the rest of the time I think he may even say this himself, although probably not. But there were certain areas he could have done a better job in. Rebounding wasn't exceptional from him, but you watch the way that he affected some of those opposing players when he was in the paint. Him against Rudy Gobert was, I mean, in the gold medal game, like very clear and evident. I'll leave it at that. But he did what he had to do, and it was nice seeing him kind of do these. I don't want to say lesser things, but take a bit of a step back, responsibility wise, because while he will be the best player on his team once the regular season starts, you are going to see an opportunity for him to defer a bit to Maxey and Paul George throughout the season. That's something that is in the best interest of preserving him. Paul George spoke a lot about that at his introductory presser. Joel Embiid has spoken about that too, about something that might help preserve him for the postseason. So for him to be able to go through the regular season in that kind of a fashion, and especially work as a facilitator as well as he did in the Olympics, that's a real opportunity for Joel Embiid this upcoming season. So I think it was a chance to work on some things that'll be helpful for the upcoming season and potentially even the postseason. But the time is effectively over of him being standoffish in a sense. But at the same time, he's going to have to take some of those lessons to implement bit by bit. But Liam, out of the Serbia game and against France, what did you see that really stood out to you as far as how Joel Embiid played?
Yeah, I kind of think it was his rising to the moment. And, to your point, Zach, he didn't close the game. That was against Serbia. That was Steph and LeBron. He didn't close the game against France. That was really, Steph on a wild, wild shooting heater, which obviously he does. But I think what's promising that you saw from Embiid and that you alluded to that could help him out come regular season and next postseason, assuming everybody's healthy, is that if he doesn't have it going all game per se, or not necessarily doesn't have it going, but if Paul George or Tyrese Maxey do have it going early on, he'll feel more comfortable being able to step back into a lesser role in those, maybe earlier minutes, in those first half minutes, knowing that the team isn't going to be completely reliant on him just being dominant in order to win ball games like it's basically been for his entire career. He has he has two reliable outlets in order to win games around him, or when it's the three of them together, he doesn't have to be the number one driving force every single night. And I think him learning how to do that with Team USA will only help when he's playing with Maxi and George. And now when rubber needs to meet the road and come fourth quarter, he can be the one that puts you over the top, because without his efforts against Serbia, they never make it to the gold medal game. And without his efforts against France, they never win that gold medal. So I think that's probably the number one best takeaway for Joel going forward is it is possible for him to morph into a lesser role on the court while still being effective. And I think he needs to probably be a little bit stronger of a rebounder. But that's just nitpicking little things. I think with Maxi and George and what they're going to be able to do together with Embiid, Embiid doesn't have to just, like I said, dominate every single game in order to put W's or to put numbers in the win column. So I think him learning that with great players around him will only translate to the great players that he has on the team in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and I think one thing that can't be understated is, this is the highest level that Joel Embiid has won at, right? He hasn't even had the opportunity to uh, perform in a conference championship, right? And when I say opportunity, I mean they literally have not gotten to it, although they have had opportunities to get to it that they did not seize. But playing on this big stage, whether it's confidence, whether it's passion, desire, whatever word that you have for it, it's given him a taste of winning at the ultimate level of a high end competition. So the hope is that now bleeds over into the NBA season, so we can see him perform in such a way in the postseason with the Sixers as well. Now, last year, and I want to be clear about this, I don't think it is fair to state that his will was not in it on the court during that series against the Knicks. His body was severely limited, and yet even still, he played very well throughout that entire postseason. So, with that being the case, that will has already started to display itself. Hopefully, it's not satisfied by getting a gold medal. Hopefully, that can't be satisfied until he's holding the Larry O'Brien. But it is something that I think does matter in terms of increasing that hunger even more to a next level, because there's always a next level to desire. And so for Joel Embiid, the hope is that winning these Olympic Games definitely did do that. One thing about his rebounding, and Mr. Sandman brings up a good secondary point to this. I'm going to combine these. Supposedly, Embiid did hurt his hand at some point during the Olympic Games. I forget if that was against Brazil or exactly who that was against. And it was seeming to still be bothering him during the game against Paris, or against France, I should say. That is not an excuse. That is something that there has to be a way found around that, right? And so whether that is finding a way to position yourself better so that you don't need to rely on your hands as much, because Embiid has historically not been a strong rebounder in terms of utilizing his hands or winning rebounding battles. A lot of it's been positioning. A lot of it's been just his general size, and we've seen his rebounding numbers go down as he's taken more of an outside defensive role. And this season, I think the hope is that Embiid's going to be down low a lot more. Not necessarily, banging in the post like you hear everybody shout every so often that you want to see from him offensively, but both offensively and defensively, I think there's going to be a concerted effort to keep him around the paint, because that is truly where Embiid is best. Offensively, working the mid range, extending from three are great aspects of his game, but I think there's no better spot for Joel than in the post. Both offensively and defensively. That doesn't mean that's the only place he's going to be. But all that just to say that he should be in more of a position to rebound this season, which then connects back to the fact that he's going to need to figure out a way to bring in those rebounds when his body's failing him. So the point that I mentioned that Mr. Salmon mentions is that he did have a knee brace on during the whole Olympics, which, that's going to be the rest of his career effectively. It's just always going to be protective of those knees. I'd be shocked if he never had any protection on one of his knees at least. But just considering that and considering the hand injury, it just goes to the point that I don't think injuries are, we will ever reach a point where injuries are not part of the discussion with Joel Embiid. It's about how he has to overcome those, right? And again, to his credit, during the past postseason, I think he did well to overcome those injury issues in terms of keeping his scoring consistent. But it goes beyond that. Defensively, he was not nearly as effective. As a rebounder, he was not nearly as effective. And that's where he's really going to need to figure out how to adapt in the face of injury come the future seasons. Tyrese Maxey taking hopefully another step forward, taking a major leap in every season so far. So again, that hope is that he has yet another step to take in him. Paul George, just a massively, massively better player offensively than Tobias Harris, should hopefully help mitigate some of that offensive need as well. So that gives the opportunity for Joel Embiid to be able to rely on those guys a bit more offensively, but he still has to figure out how to up that defensive game and that rebounding game in the face of any potential postseason injury, because the unfortunate situation is, come hell or high water, it seems like Joel will have some injury to deal with after playing through an NBA season. It's just, what is it? What's the severity, and how can he overcome it? So, now that we, have effectively gone over the Olympic performance of Embiid and, what we thought of those individual matchups, I think the story has to go to, where does this point to in the regular season, right? And we already talked about it a little bit with that kind of winning lesson, experience, I should say, in the Olympic Games. But now, what possibly that we did see or didn't see from Embiid during the Olympics, or what takeaway that he could have from the Olympics, do we really need to see come the regular season? Justin, why don't we start with you?
I think a couple things. Seeing some of the greats, just prepare for big games, and also seeing like his team fight in those tough moments. It seems like there have been tough moments, and sometimes the Sixers just don't pull out of it because of pouting or this or that. And like Liam said, he rose to his moment, right, which helped deliver the team out of a bad situation. So hopefully that leaves an imprint on him. And then secondly, I think the lesson he learned is just being able and being more comfortable to defer to his teammates. No, he doesn't have Steph Curry. No, he doesn't have LeBron James or Anthony Davis or whoever else, right? But he has two really good running mates with him where he can learn to defer and bring that into the regular season and save himself, right, for the playoffs. He doesn't have to average 33 a game. Now, he's dominant enough to do that and continue to do that, but that doesn't mean he have to do that this year. and he could defer to the new guys. I saw somewhere where he said he's going to really like push Tyrese Maxey to really take another step forward offensively for the team, and hopefully that saves him and also gives him better energy for rebounding, for shot blocking, for when you have to go all out as a two-way player at his size. For every possession you have the ball in your hand, or the defense depends on you, how taxing that could be on your body. So hopefully it'll allow him to focus on, one thing here, one thing there. It might be a week in a season where Maxey's on the heater and he could just focus on, of course, he'll get his 25, whatever, easy, but it won't be forced. It'll be the flow in the game, and then he'll be able to focus on other stuff. So I'm hoping that that's what he'll take from that. And just leaning into the experience. We're in the playoffs. We're in the first round or the second round, and we're down 10 with 6 minutes to go in the 10th. I mean, excuse me, in the fourth. Like, let me lean into that energy I had when we were in Paris, and let me, help my team, pull my team out the gutter, and let's go. So that's what I'm hoping that he took from it. And hopefully that'll help them get past the second round at least.
Yeah, and Liam, how about you? What are you hoping that he takes away from, from this experience into what he can put into the regular season, and more importantly, the postseason thereafter?
I think the number one thing for me would be like the diligence and the overall level of care and how to prepare and really go about trying to win. You see LeBron James, who's 100 years old, and you see Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, who have, they aren't young either. They're drafted in 2007 and 2009. So, they've carried the NBA for the last 20 years, and it's very likely that none of the three of them ever win another NBA championship. So for him to be able to witness, those old wily veterans still be the three best players on this team and still practice and train so invariably hard to accomplish winning a championship, well, in this case a gold medal, but to reach that mountaintop, it can only be good for Joel to have witnessed. Like, you think you work hard until you're right next to LeBron James trying to accomplish winning a title or a gold medal. You might meet up with him at All-Star weekend where none of them care at all. But I say, everybody cares about, defending your country's honor and winning at the Olympics, but to be side by side with LeBron, KD, and Steph in particular, as all three of them are still at the peak of their powers playing together, and watching how they went about their business in order to accomplish what they had to accomplish, can only be a good thing for Joel Embiid, because the only player that he's played with that has that kind of like maniacal winning personality would be Jimmy Butler, and I don't think we knew that about Jimmy Butler until he got to Miami. So that was, after he was here, obviously. So I think him experiencing that and him being able to translate that over to a still young and impressionable Maxi, and a more tapered and laid back super or a star like a Paul George, who has, admitted himself that he is not a number one. I think that can only be a good thing for Embiid to have been with those guys and watch them do what they do en route to a gold medal.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing being a number one in the NBA. So, as you pointed out, as Justin here checks in and points out, being around a group of guys like that, it's a unique opportunity to see how they not only prepare for the game, but how they react during the game as well. You're getting an up close look as a teammate. So that's I think the biggest hope for Joel Embiid is that he's able to take those winning tendencies and parlay them into, again, not just the regular season, but most importantly, into the postseason, into crunch time. Thinking specifically about how Steph performed in, the semifinal against Serbia, and then the final against France. Like, that's the kind of stuff that Embiid's going to need to take over into. And yeah, he's not going to be chucking threes like Steph, but it's not just about, you know, the literal shots that they take on the court. It's about the mentality. It's about the attitude. And honestly, I think there's perhaps no two guys to learn that better from than Steph Curry and even LeBron James. You know, albeit all the criticism that he's faced over mentality. You know, watching, for instance, what he did when he was with Cleveland against Steph Curry and the Warriors. You know, I don't think there's anyone who can question LeBron's mentality when he's truly locked in. So once again, in this past Olympic Games, it looked like LeBron was locked in and performing as well as I think any, what's he, 39-year-old could perform at that kind of stage. So, you know, an impressive performance by him and by Steph. Hopefully Embiid has learned a good bit from that. We are a Sixers pod, you know, so Justin checking in with an Eagles question. I normally wouldn't bring it up because he did check in with that good comment about the you know, being around the group of guys, those winners. I am going to acknowledge the kicker situation and the punter situation with the Eagles super quick. Looks as though Covey is once again the punt returner, and Shipley was getting first reps at kick returner during the preseason game. So we'll see what that means for the regular season. But I don't think it's going to be Rodgers. I don't think they put a starting defensive player in there. And I also don't think that they would want Covey for both punts and kicks. That's not been their MO. But back to the Sixers, as Mr. Sandman says, great players have routines. Learn the routine. 100% spot on. You got to figure out, you know, and this doesn't mean throw baby powder in the air before games. You know, that's not, you know, what any of us are talking about here. But, you know, how do they prepare for the game? How do they prepare for the opponent? How do they prepare for the matchup? That's the routine. Learn those routines and instill those best practices, I should say. And above all, hand that down to the next generation as well. You know, this is something that I think we're even going to see ripple benefits go down to guys like Tyrese Maxey, you know, where theoretically Joel Embiid, you know, what I'll say is forget theoretically. He has the opportunity to come back, in a sense, a changed man, being a person who has learned more by studying under these, you know, all-time great players, Steph, KD, LeBron, and he has an opportunity to kind of instill those mentality or that mentality, those lessons to guys like Maxey who are still growing in this league. So there is an opportunity there, not just for his own growth, but for the team as well. But listen, the Olympic Games are now in the books. We are, I believe, just about 7 weeks away from training camp. This comes the real doldrums of the offseason, right? You know, the Sixers have signed most every player to their roster. The Rumpf Classic is over. You know, the Olympic Games are over. Summer League's over. You know, no more FIBA basketball for you know, any of the premier NBA players. It's going to be a little bit of a slog from here on out, but you know, there is still that ever excitement around who will that 14th player be. Will it be Marcus Morris? Will it be Robert Covington? And will it be somebody who's not yet been a Sixer or a Houston Rocket? You know, these are all questions that we're still going to be asking ourselves, you know, in the future weeks between now and the start of the season. What we do know is that the Sixers will be opening their season against the Milwaukee Bucks on October 26th, Wednesday, October 26th, at home, which is, it feels like a rarity for the Sixers to open their season at home. So that's a nice special treat there. Just real quick, guys, I just want to get your immediate thoughts on the Sixers facing the Milwaukee Bucks, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, of course, former Sixers coach Doc Rivers in their first matchup, and especially that being at home. Justin, how are you feeling about that game one matchup that they're going to be heading into?
It's good for them to be starting off at home. Second, I'm curious to see the remaining part because they usually always have a tough first week or week and a half, so that'll be interesting. But I think drama in the NBA, former coach, you know, coming back, you know, Giannis versus Embiid, Dame versus Maxey, Middleton versus George, I guess. So it'll just be interesting to, you know, how it plays out. But I think it's good. I think we're going to see the Sixers in a lot of primetime situations. They've already been really primetime, but I don't think, you know, last year with the stuff with Harden, they weren't on TV as much. But I think there'll be a team you see on national TV a lot this year, with the roster, with the expectations. So it's good for them to be on, opening night as well as I know Christmas as well. So we'll be watching them on national TV a lot, and Doc Rivers will get booed again as usual, and hopefully Giannis doesn't throw a ladder. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, Ladder Watch 2024 will be in full effect. Liam, what are your thoughts about this upcoming matchup against the Bucks?
Yeah, so you said we're getting into the very slow days of the summer. Now with all the basketball stuff over, we're in prime Ben Simmons open gym jump shot territory watch. So keep your eyes open for that. As far as our matchup with the Bucks, fun fact about me: Damian Lillard's my favorite player ever. So I'm happy that he's out of Portland, and I'm not so thrilled when he went to Milwaukee. But now that I kind of see the direction that their team's going, doesn't bother me as much. What I think about the matchup is there's a lot of different good layers to it. I think it's smart to, starting the season at home, it's smart to give us a matchup that's going to have the Wells Fargo Center, or excuse me, not, is it the Wells Fargo Center still this year? Maybe, I think
Well,
it's
it hasn't really been the Wells Fargo Center for about 5 years, but it is technically officially the Wells Fargo Center until 2025.
Okay, sounds good. So the Sixers arena, it's best to have them buzzing from game one. The fan base is going to be excited for Paul George's arrival and Maxi's continued ascension. But if you throw game one, give them the Wizards or the Hornets, it's not going to have the same sort of feel in the building. So my guess is that game is going to be on national TV, being that we know the opening night schedule does not, or the opening Tuesday schedule with the 2 TNT games does not involve the Sixers. So my guess is this game will be on national TV. And like you said, Justin, you got Giannis versus Embiid, you got Maxi versus Dame, you got, Doc is obviously Maxi and Embiid's former coach. He's also Paul George's former coach in LA. Paul George, cheated on Doc's daughter with his current wife. You got all those good storylines in there. So I think that was a smart and shrewd first game for the Sixers, who I think are a tier above the Milwaukee Bucks at this point, as Chris Middleton starts to, show his aging signs. They get rid of Drew Holiday for Damian Lillard, the team that acquires Drew Holiday, not directly from them, but eventually from Portland, then wins the title, and you're out in the first round against an upstart Indiana Pacers. So I don't love the direction that the Bucks are going, but I think it's a very smart and good first test for the Sixers, and I'm excited to break down that matchup when it gets closer.
Yeah, I think that's my general focus, is that it's a tough first matchup. I think it's a good first test, and when you look at kind of the Bucks trajectory, like you said, it looks to be ticking down. So that gives hope that it will be a game the Sixers will be able to handle. I wrote about this earlier at phillysportsnetwork.com, but this game, the Sixers are entering this game with a lot of offseason transition once again. That is something that is pretty common over the past few years. But one big difference is that for the past 2 out of 3 years, they have had a notable player sitting out, and that is not the case this season. They've added a guy to the roster. So you have a guy who is a better fit than James Harden was, a guy who is happy and ready to be here in Philadelphia, and hopefully, that should translate on the court. When the Sixers, they actually opened their season against Milwaukee last season, when they played, they lost all 3 of the games they played against Milwaukee. But in that series opener, that was the only one that Joel Embiid played. I think they lost by one or 2 points. I can't quite remember, but it was a very close game. But I looked into the box score of that game, and some of the names were near. It was a struggle, right? So PJ Tucker started that game. That's obviously tough for Philadelphia. In addition to that, you had Jared Springer getting minutes, who solid prospect, but clearly wasn't ready for a legitimate role. Patrick Beverley was fine, but it's not as if he was a 6-man candidate. And then one surprise that even I had forgotten about, Danny Green played in that game. He played a whole 14 minutes in that game. It was one of the 2 games that he played for the Sixers that's last season. So going into this year, the depth around the team is looking much better, right? You're not relying on Paul Reed to be a near starter level replacement for Joel Embiid, which we all always loved Paul Reed, of course, but he was a bit overtaxed at times, being asked to do more than perhaps what he was suited for. Andre Drummond's ready for that moment. We know that. We've seen that. Then you talk about guys like Caleb Martin being added to the starting lineup. Kelly Oubre's back in year 2 with Philadelphia. That should be great for chemistry because the entire team, from everyone that I've spoken to on the team, particularly Tyrese Maxey, everybody loved Kelly Oubre. So I think seeing him in year 2 and not having as much responsibility, not as much ball handling responsibility, to be perfectly clear, I think that's going to be good for Oubre as well. And then just some of the other depth guys. You have Kyle Lowry off the jump this year. Reggie Jackson's a bit further down the bench. This is just a more well-rounded team than it was last year. And I think, Liam, as you said, the Bucks are kind of continuing to trend down. So I'm pretty excited for what the opening game has in store for Philadelphia. Of course, be down there to see for myself what's going on. And then, we'll see from there what the first expectations, will be for this new look Sixers team. But for now, I think it should be an air of excitement. No reason to doubt prematurely. And again, a lot of exciting offseason moves and an exciting matchup. I think that you're going to get a chance to see Joel guard Giannis again. And then when he's not, I think you'll see Paul George fill in spurts. But the most effective defenseman for Giannis has been Embiid in the past. But it'll be an exciting game. We'll talk a little bit more preseason action once we get a little closer to that. We'll talk a bit of training camp when we get a bit closer. I have a special guest in mind who will be on hand for training camp that potentially we can hear from. So we'll talk more about that as we get a little bit closer. But for now, thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you so much for listening, joining us today. Loved all the comments that we had today. Be sure to like this on YouTube and follow the YouTube channel for Philly Sports Network. We're also have all these episodes on Spotify, Apple Music. So be sure to check those and some of our past episodes out as well. But for now, thank you so much for joining us today. I've been Zach Chavalella here with Justin Crosby, Liam Sagherian, and this has been another episode of Still Processing, 76ers Podcast.